Admiral Daeho Kang stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, staring at the holographic display floating before him. The image showed a fleet of 300 warships moving toward Earth. 300 alien vessels, each one larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. His own fleet numbered only 47 ships. The math was simple and terrifying. "Sir, the Valthek transmission is coming through again," Lieutenant Bora Kim said from her station. Her voice was steady, but Daeho could see her hands trembling slightly over the controls. "Put it through," he replied. The image shifted to show a massive alien creature. The Valthek commander had 4 arms, thick armored skin, and eyes that glowed like hot coals. Morthak was his name, and he had conquered 40 star systems in the last decade. Not a single species had defeated him. "Humans," Morthak's voice boomed through the speakers. "You have 12 hours to surrender your worlds. Evacuate your military stations. Disable your weapons. Submit to the Valthek Empire. If you comply, your deaths will be quick. If you resist, we will burn your colonies and scatter your ashes across the void. This is your only warning." The transmission ended. Silence fell across the bridge. Daeho looked around at his crew. Young faces, old faces, all of them frightened but determined. These were the best people humanity had to offer, and they were about to face impossible odds. "Commander Lee, status report," Daeho said. Jiwan Lee, his first officer, pulled up the fleet roster. "We have 47 operational warships, Admiral. 15 cruisers, 22 frigates, and 10 destroyers. Another 30 civilian vessels are in the area, mostly cargo freighters and mining ships. Total military personnel, 18,000. Civilian population in the Neptune station and nearby colonies, 200,000. And the Valthek fleet? 300 warships. At least 50 of them are capital ships twice the size of our largest cruiser. Their weapons range is superior. Their shields are stronger. By every metric, they outclass us." Captain Hyunwoo Park stepped forward from the tactical station. The fighter pilot looked too young to be commanding a squadron, but he had proven himself in dozens of skirmishes against pirates and raiders. "Admiral, we should evacuate the civilians. Get them away from Neptune before the Valthek arrive." "Evacuate to where?" Daeho asked quietly. "If we abandon Neptune, they'll chase down the refugee ships. Then they'll move to Mars, then Earth. No, we make our stand here. We show them that humanity doesn't run." A new voice spoke up. Dr. Minji Choi entered the bridge carrying a data pad. The weapons physicist looked exhausted. She had been working for 3 days straight on a secret project. "Admiral, I need to show you something. It might change our odds." Daeho followed her to a private briefing room off the bridge. Minji pulled up complex diagrams and equations that made his head hurt. He was a military man, not a scientist. "Explain it simply, Doctor." "The Valthek shields operate on a quantum harmonic frequency," Minji said. "I've developed a pulse weapon that can disrupt that frequency. For about 45 seconds, their shields would be completely down, vulnerable. That sounds like exactly what we need. There's a problem. The weapon is untested. When we fire it, there's a 40% chance it will overload and destroy the ship carrying it. And the pulse might affect our own ships too if they're too close." Daeho processed this. A weapon that might kill them all, but might also give them a fighting chance. "How many ships can we equip with these weapons?" 7. "I can have them installed in 60 hours. The Valthek arrive in 72 hours. Do it." Over the next 3 days, the Terran Defense Coalition prepared for battle. Every available ship was called to Neptune. Engineers worked around the clock modifying weapon systems. Fighter pilots practiced attack runs until they could fly them in their sleep. In the cargo bays, soldiers loaded ammunition and checked equipment. Daeho barely slept. He spent every hour planning, calculating, trying to find a way to win against impossible odds. Commander Lee brought him meals that he forgot to eat. Captain Park briefed him on fighter readiness. Lieutenant Kim provided updates on enemy movements. On the second day, Engineer Ha-Jun Yoon approached with an unusual proposal. "Admiral, the civilian freighters. We could arm them. With what?" "They're cargo ships. They have industrial mining lasers. We modify the power output, add some missile pods to the hull. They won't survive a direct fight, but they could provide supporting fire, maybe confuse the enemy sensors." It was desperate, but everything about this situation was desperate. "Do it. Coordinate with Captain Shin on the Shadow Runner. I want those freighters to look like warships on Valthek sensors." Captain Taewon Shin specialized in electronic warfare. His stealth frigate could make sensor ghosts appear where no ships existed. If they could make the Valtech think humanity's fleet was larger than it really was, maybe they would hesitate. Maybe they would make mistakes. On the final day before the battle, Deho called all ship commanders to a virtual conference. 70 faces appeared on his screen representing every vessel in the defense fleet. "I won't lie to you," he began. "We are outgunned and outnumbered. The Valtech have crushed every species they've encountered. They expect us to surrender or die quickly. But they've made one critical mistake. They don't know humans. They don't know that we've survived ice ages and plagues and world wars. They don't know that when we're cornered, we fight harder. They're about to learn." He outlined the battle plan. 3 phases: deception, disruption, decimation. They would use fake sensor signatures to split the Valtech fleet. They would blind them with electronic warfare. They would exploit every weakness in their technology. And when the moment came, they would strike with everything they had. "Some of us won't survive this battle," Deho continued. "But if we run, if we surrender, humanity dies anyway. Better to die fighting and give Earth a chance. Better to show the galaxy that we're not prey. We're predators." The commanders saluted and disconnected. Deho sat alone in the dim light of his ready room. He thought about his daughter back on Earth studying to be a doctor. He thought about the billions of people who would never know this battle was happening until it was over. Their lives depended on what happened in the next few days. A chime at the door. Commander Lee entered without waiting for permission. She placed a cup of coffee on his desk. "Real coffee, not the synthetic stuff from the replicators." "The crew is ready, sir. Scared, but ready. And you?" "I'm terrified," she admitted. "But I believe in you. The crew believes in you. Whatever happens tomorrow, we'll follow you into hell. Let's hope it doesn't come to that." Late that night, Lieutenant Kim detected the Valtech fleet on long-range sensors. They had dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. 300 ships moving in perfect formation like a swarm of locusts. Beautiful and terrible. Deho stood on the bridge watching them approach. His crew worked quietly at their stations. The Indomitable hummed with energy as weapons charged and shields came online. Across the fleet, 47 human warships and 23 armed freighters prepared for battle. "All ships report ready, Admiral," Commander Lee said. Deho nodded. In 72 hours, everything had changed. Humanity stood at the edge of extinction or triumph. There was no middle ground anymore. "Send a message to the Valtech fleet," he ordered. "Tell them this: Earth refuses to surrender. If they want our worlds, they'll have to take them." The reply came within minutes. Morthak's face appeared on screen, laughing. "Then you will die, human. Your ships will burn. Your colonies will fall, and the galaxy will forget you ever existed." "We'll see about that," Deho said quietly, and cut the transmission. The Valtech armada continued its approach. Neptune hung in the distance, a blue giant surrounded by orbital stations and defensive platforms. This was where humanity would make its stand. This was where everything would be decided. Captain Park's fighter squadrons launched, taking up positions around the capital ships. Dr. Choi's experimental weapons powered up on 7 vessels. Captain Shin's stealth ships disappeared into the darkness, preparing to weave their electronic illusions. Deho took a deep breath and gave the order that would begin the battle. "All ships, battle stations. Prepare to engage the enemy." The Shadow Runner drifted through space like a ghost. Captain Taewon Shin watched his screens as thousands of fake sensor signatures bloomed across the Neptune region. To any scanning equipment, it would look like hundreds of human warships were positioning themselves for battle. The Valtech were about to get very confused. "Deploy another wave of decoys near the radiation belt," Taewon ordered. His crew worked quickly, launching small drones that mimicked the energy signatures of full-sized cruisers. It was beautiful deception, the kind of trick that could save thousands of lives. "Sir, we're reading increased Valtech scanner activity. They're trying to get accurate numbers on our fleet." Taewon smiled. "Good, let them waste time counting ghosts. Keep randomizing the signatures. Make it impossible for them to track which ones are real." Across the defensive perimeter, Engineer Hajun Yoon was finishing the last modifications on a civilian cargo freighter called the Morning Star. The ship's captain, an older woman named Soman, watched nervously as massive mining lasers were mounted on her hull. "This is insane," Soman said. "My ship carries grain and medical supplies. It's not built for combat." "Nothing we're doing is built for this," Hajun replied, tightening the final connection. "But that's the point. The Valtech think they know everything about human military capabilities. They've studied our warships, our weapons, our tactics. They haven't prepared for civilian vessels mounting industrial equipment as weapons. These lasers can cut through asteroids. What will they do to enemy ships? Hopefully make them think twice about ignoring you. Hajun stepped back and examined his work. The Morning Star now bristled with weapons pods and reinforced armor plating. It wouldn't survive sustained combat, but it might last long enough to matter. 22 other civilian ships were receiving similar modifications. On the Indomitable, Dr. Minji Choi supervised the installation of her quantum disruption pulse generator. The device was enormous, taking up an entire weapons bay. Thick cables connected it to the ship's power core. Warning lights blinked along its surface. "Are you sure this won't blow us all to pieces?" Commander Lee asked, watching the installation process. "No," Minji admitted. "I'm not sure at all. The theory is sound. The calculations work on paper. But we've never tested it under real conditions. When we fire this weapon, we'll either disable the enemy fleet or tear a hole in space-time, possibly both. Those aren't very reassuring odds, Doctor." "I know, but it's the only advantage we have. The Valthek shields are their greatest strength. If we can take those shields down even for a minute, our weapons become effective. Without that window, we're just throwing stones at a fortress." 6 other ships were receiving the same weapons. The risks were distributed across the fleet, but everyone knew the danger. 40% failure rate. Nearly half the ships carrying these weapons might not survive firing them. In the fighter bay, Captain Hyunwoo Park was drilling his pilots on a maneuver so dangerous that it violated every safety regulation. They called it the Gauntlet. It required fighters to fly in tight formation through debris fields at maximum speed, threading between obstacles with only centimeters of clearance. "Again," Hyunwoo ordered as the simulation ended. "Faster this time. When the battle starts, you won't have time to think. Your reflexes need to know this pattern perfectly." One of his pilots, a young man named Sung-Ho Kwan, pulled off his helmet. "Sir, 3 of us crashed in that run. This maneuver is suicide." "So is fighting 300 warships with 47, Hyunwoo replied. "The Valthek expect us to fight like we're trained to fight. Careful, calculated, following the rules. If we do that, we lose. The Gauntlet lets us get close to their capital ships inside their defensive perimeter. They won't expect fighters to fly that aggressively. That surprise might be the only thing keeping you alive." Sung-Ho climbed back into his cockpit. He was scared, but he trusted his captain. They all did. Hyunwoo had a reputation for impossible flying and somehow surviving every mission. If anyone could teach them to win against these odds, it was him. Admiral Daeho Kang studied the tactical displays in his ready room. The Valthek fleet had split into 3 formations as they approached Neptune. Morthak was commanding the center group himself, the largest formation with over 100 ships. The other 2 wings were smaller but still massive. Ensign Nari Han, a tactical officer, had developed what she called the scatter protocol. It was a retreat pattern that looked like panic, but was actually carefully calculated. "The key is making them think we're broken," Nari explained to the admiral. "When they push hard against one section of our line, we scatter in apparent chaos. But we're actually drawing them into the radiation belt around Neptune. Their sensors don't work well there. Our ships are better shielded against radiation than theirs. We know these orbits. They don't. You want me to fake a retreat? Just for 90 seconds. Long enough to get them where we want them. Then we spring the real trap." Daeho considered this. Pride made him want to face the enemy head-on, but pride got people killed. Add it to the battle plan. Phase 1 now includes the scatter protocol. Lieutenant Bora Kim was monitoring Valthek communications, trying to learn anything useful about their command structure. The aliens used tight beam transmissions that were hard to intercept, but she had managed to catch fragments. "Admiral, I'm picking up something interesting," she reported. "The Valthek wing commanders are arguing with Morthak. They want to advance faster, but he's holding them back. I think he's worried about a trap." "Good, he should be worried. There's more. Their communications suggest they've never faced serious resistance before. Every species they've conquered either surrendered immediately or was crushed in the first engagement. They have no experience with extended battles. This was valuable intelligence. The Valthek were arrogant because they had never needed to be anything else. They expected easy victory because they had always achieved easy victory. That arrogance could be exploited. Daeho called another meeting of ship commanders. This time he shared everything they had learned about Valthek weaknesses. The shield refresh cycle that lasted 0.003 seconds. The communication delays between their ships. The way their formations relied on overwhelming firepower rather than maneuverability. We can't match their strength, Deho said, so we don't try. We hit them where they're weak. We move faster than they expect. We use weapons they haven't prepared for. We fight our battle, not theirs. Captain Shin reported that the sensor decoys were performing perfectly. The Valtech scouts are reporting wildly different fleet numbers. Some scans show 60 human ships, others show 200. They don't know what to believe. Keep them confused until the last moment. When they finally realize most of those signatures are fake, we'll already be in position. The hours tick down. 24 hours until contact. 12 hours. 6 hours. The Valtech Armada continued its steady approach. 3 massive formations converging on Neptune like the jaws of a trap. They had no idea they were sailing into their own ambush. Weapons were charged. Shields were calibrated. Fighter pilots tried to sleep but mostly just stared at the ceiling. Engineers checked and rechecked every system. Medical bays prepared for casualties. Everyone knew that in a few hours some of them would be dead. Dr. Minji Choi stood in front of her quantum disruption generator, running final diagnostics. The numbers looked good, but numbers on a screen didn't account for the chaos of battle. She thought about the 40% failure rate. Which ships would survive firing these weapons? Which ones would tear themselves apart? Doctor, you should get some rest, Commander Lee said, finding her in the weapons bay at 3 in the morning. I can't. If this weapon fails, I need to know why. I need to understand what went wrong so we can fix it. If it fails, we might not survive to fix anything. Then someone else will need to know. For the next battle. For the next time humanity faces extinction. Minji saved her notes to every databank on the ship. If the Indomitable was destroyed, maybe someone would recover the information and learn from her mistakes. Captain Hyunwoo Park found Sung-ho Kwan in the fighter bay, sitting in his cockpit even though launch was still hours away. Can't sleep either? Hyunwoo asked. I keep thinking about my sister. She's on Earth. If we lose, she'll never know we tried. She'll just wake up one day and the Valtech will be there. Then we don't lose. How can you be so confident? You've seen the numbers. I've also seen humans do impossible things. We walked on our moon before we could reliably keep food fresh. We split the atom before we understood what atoms really were. We're terrible at knowing what's impossible until after we've already done it. The Valtech are about to learn that lesson. 1 hour until contact. The Valtech fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the Neptune perimeter. 300 warships perfectly arrayed, bristling with weapons. They were beautiful in a terrible way, like a storm or a wildfire, unstoppable forces of nature. Except humans had learned to survive storms and control fire. They were about to learn how to break an empire. Admiral Daeho Kang took his position on the bridge. Every station was manned. Every ship in the fleet was in position. Real warships hidden among fake sensor signatures, electronic warfare packages ready to deploy, experimental weapons charged and waiting. The Valtech fleet crossed into weapons range like a rolling thunder. 300 warships moving in perfect formation, their shields glowing with power. On the bridge of his command vessel, Morthak watched the tactical displays with satisfaction. The human fleet appeared scattered and confused just as he expected. Primitive creatures, he growled to his officers. They pretend to have strength, but they have no discipline, no unity. Look at their formations, spread across half the orbital zone. They make themselves easy prey. What Morthak didn't know was that he was looking at ghosts. Captain Taewon Shin's sensor decoys were working perfectly, showing Valtech scanners exactly what Shin wanted them to see. A confused, disorganized human fleet with ships in all the wrong positions. Sir, should we broadcast the final surrender demand? One of Morthak's officers asked. No, they had their chance. Begin the attack. Split the fleet into 3 groups and destroy them section by section. I want this finished quickly. The Valtech Armada divided, just as Admiral Daeho Kang had predicted. Each formation moved toward what appeared to be a concentration of human ships. They were confident, aggressive, moving faster than military doctrine suggested. They wanted a quick victory to add to their long list of conquests. On the Indomitable, Lieutenant Bora Kim watched the enemy movements with satisfaction. Admiral, the Valtech are splitting their forces. All 3 groups are moving toward our decoy positions. Phase 1 is working, Commander Lee added. They've completely fallen for it. Daeho allowed himself a small smile. Captain Shin, are you ready? Across the comm channel, Taewon's voice crackled. "Ready, Admiral. Just give the word. Execute Phase 2. Light them up." The Shadowrunner and 5 other stealth frigates dropped their cloaking fields and launched thousands of electromagnetic pulse mines across the battlefield. The small devices spread out like seeds on the wind, creating interference patterns that scrambled sensors and communications. Within seconds, the Valthek fleet was partially blind. Morthak roared in fury as his tactical displays filled with static. "What is happening? Where are my sensor readings? Sir, we're experiencing massive electronic interference. We can't get accurate positions on the human fleet." "Then use visual tracking. They're primitive ships, they can't hide from our eyes." But in the vast darkness of space, visual tracking was nearly useless at combat ranges. The Valthek fleet slowed, their formations becoming ragged as ships lost coordination with each other. "Now," Deho said quietly, "all ships, reveal positions and open fire." 47 human warships dropped their electronic masking and appeared on Valtech sensors like stars igniting. They weren't scattered across the orbital zone. They were concentrated into 3 tight formations, each one perfectly positioned to strike at the divided Valtech groups from unexpected angles. The humans fired first. Railguns hurled tungsten slugs at incredible speeds. Missiles streaked through space trailing fire. Energy weapons painted lines of destruction across the darkness. The opening salvo was devastating. Tactical Officer Yoonji Song coordinated targeting from the Indomitable. Her fingers danced across controls, directing fire from multiple ships onto single targets. "Focus on their lead vessels. Break their formation cohesion." The Valthek ships had powerful shields, but those shields had a weakness that Commander Lee had discovered: a 0.003-second refresh cycle. It wasn't much, barely a heartbeat, but it was enough. Lieutenant Junho Ryu commanded the torpedo frigate Spearhead. His ship carried the fastest missiles in the human fleet, designed to exploit exactly this kind of vulnerability. "Fire control, I want perfect timing. Wait for the shield refresh, then launch everything." The Spearhead's computers calculated the exact moment. Missiles launched in a carefully timed sequence, each one arriving during that brief window when the Valtech shields were resetting. The results were spectacular. A Valtech destroyer took 3 missile hits directly to its hull. Explosions rippled across its surface. The ship's reactor went critical and detonated, taking 2 more enemy vessels with it in the expanding sphere of destruction. "Direct hit," someone shouted on the Spearhead's bridge. "Don't celebrate yet," Junho snapped. "Reload and acquire new targets. We have 297 more ships to kill." Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships were smaller and weaker, but they were faster and more maneuverable. They darted between the larger Valtech vessels, firing at close range where the enemy's heavy weapons couldn't track them effectively. In the first 90 seconds of combat, 14 Valtech warships were destroyed or crippled. It was a stunning success beyond anything the human commanders had dared hope for. But the Valtech were not defeated yet. They were confused and hurt, but they had overwhelming numbers. Morthak's voice boomed across Valtech channels, reorganizing his forces. "All ships reform defensive positions. Launch fighters! Target the human capital ships and destroy them." The Valtech fleet began to pull back together, their initial confusion fading. They returned fire with massive weapons that could crack a human cruiser in half with a single shot. The destroyer Reliant took a direct hit and simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant. 1,600 people gone in a flash of light. "We need the fighters now," Deho said urgently. Captain Hyunwoo Park had been waiting for this moment. His squadron was already moving, 50 fighters launching from carrier bays across the human fleet. They were small, fast, and piloted by people who had trained for weeks on a maneuver that everyone said was impossible. "All wings, form up for the gauntlet," Hyunwoo ordered. "Remember your training. Stay tight, stay fast, don't think. Let your reflexes fly the ship." The fighters formed into a tight wedge formation and accelerated toward the Valtech capital ships. Ahead of them, the battle had created a debris field of shattered hulls, frozen atmosphere, and tumbling wreckage. The gauntlet required flying through this chaos at maximum speed. Pilot Sung-Ho Kwan gripped his controls so hard his knuckles turned white. He could see the debris field rushing toward him, obstacles that would tear his fighter apart if he hit them. Behind him, his wingmates flew so close that their engine wash buffeted his shields. "Trust the formation," Hyunwoo's voice reminded them. "Follow my lead exactly." They hit the debris field at 800 meters per second. The world became a blur of motion. Zhongho's fighter twisted and rolled, following Hyunwoo's path through the chaos. Alarms screamed warnings about obstacles, but there was no time to think. Metal fragments the size of buildings flashed past his canopy with meters to spare. Then they were through, emerging from the debris field right in the middle of the Valtech fleet. The enemy capital ships loomed ahead, massive and vulnerable. Their point defense weapons hadn't expected fighters to approach from this angle, through what should have been an impassable obstacle. All fighters, weapons free. Hit them hard! 50 fighters unleashed everything they had. Missiles streaked into unshielded sections of hull. Energy weapons strafed across bridge sections and weapon ports. It was chaos, beautiful and terrible. Zhongho locked onto a Valtech carrier and fired. His missiles struck home, penetrating deep into the ship's fighter bays. Secondary explosions rippled through the carrier as its own munitions detonated. The massive ship began to break apart. "I got one!" Zhongho couldn't help shouting. "I actually got one." "Don't stop now," Hyunwoo replied. "We're in the middle of their formation. Keep moving, keep firing. Don't give them time to target you." But the Valtech were adapting. Their fighters launched in swarms, thousands of small craft moving to intercept the human squadrons. Point defense weapons recalibrated, tracking the fast-moving human fighters. Hyunwoo's wingmate took a hit, her fighter tumbling out of control before exploding. 3 more fighters died in the next 30 seconds. The element of surprise was fading. "All squadrons scatter and return to carriers," Hyunwoo ordered. "We did our job. Time to get out before they kill us all." The fighters broke formation and fled at maximum speed. Half of them made it back. 26 fighters lost, 24 survived. But they had destroyed or damaged 8 Valtech capital ships. The trade was worth it, even if the pilots who died would never know. On the Indomitable, Deho watched the tactical display update. The battle had been raging for 11 minutes now. Human losses: 3 ships destroyed, 7 more heavily damaged. Valtech losses: 22 ships destroyed, 40 more damaged. The numbers looked good, but they were deceiving. The Valtech still had overwhelming force. They were pulling back together, forming a defensive sphere that was harder to attack. And they were angry now, no longer confident but focused and dangerous. "Sir, the Valtech fleet is reforming," Commander Lee reported. "They're converging on our position. I think they're done being careful. They're going to hit us with everything they have." Morthak had indeed decided to end this battle quickly. The humans had surprised him, hurt him, but that only made him more determined to crush them completely. He ordered all remaining ships to concentrate their fire on the largest human vessels. "Target their flagship," he commanded. "I want that admiral dead. I want his ship turned to dust." The Valtech fleet surged forward in a massive wave. 300 ships had become 278, but that was still an overwhelming force. 7 human ships fired their quantum disruption pulse generators simultaneously. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then space itself rippled like water disturbed by a stone. Waves of invisible energy spread across the battlefield at the speed of light, passing through both human and Valtech vessels. On the Indomitable, Dr. Minji Choi watched her instruments with terrified fascination. The weapon was working. The quantum harmonics were disrupting shield frequencies across the entire Valtech fleet. But the power drain was enormous, far worse than her calculations had predicted. Weapon temperature rising rapidly, her assistant called out. "We're approaching critical levels." "I see it," Minji replied, her hands flying across controls. "Divert all non-essential power to cooling systems. We just need to hold for 40 more seconds." Across the battlefield, the Valtech shield matrices flickered and died. 278 warships suddenly became vulnerable, their greatest defense stripped away by technology they didn't understand. For exactly 47 seconds, they were naked before human weapons. Admiral Deho Kang didn't waste a microsecond. "All ships, full weapons release?" "Everything we have right now." The human fleet erupted with fire. Every gun, every missile, every energy weapon discharged at once. It was a storm of destruction. Years of ammunition expenditure compressed into less than a minute. The night lit up with explosions. Valtech ships died by the dozens. Without shields, their hulls couldn't withstand the concentrated fire. Capital ships that had seemed invincible moments ago broke apart under sustained bombardment. Smaller vessels simply vaporized. The alien armada that had conquered 40 systems was being torn apart. But the pulse weapon was taking its toll on the human fleet too. On the cruiser Valiant, the quantum generator overloaded despite all safety measures. The ship's chief engineer, a woman named Yuna, saw the readings spike into impossible numbers. "Evacuate engineering," she screamed. "Everyone out now!" She stayed behind, trying desperately to contain the overload manually. Her hands worked the controls even as alarms shrieked and metal began to glow white-hot. If she could just buy 10 more seconds, her crew could reach the escape pods. The Valiant's generator exploded, tearing the cruiser in half. Yuna and 300 crew members died instantly, but her sacrifice allowed 200 others to escape in pods before the ship's reactor went critical. On the Indomitable, Minji felt tears running down her face as she watched the Valiant's marker disappear from her screen. 40% failure rate. The numbers had been clear, but numbers didn't capture the reality of real people dying because of her weapon. "Temperature stabilizing," her assistant reported. "Generator is holding. We made it." 5 other ships had also survived firing the pulse weapon. But the Valiant was gone, and the destroyer shield had suffered critical damage, its weapons bay now a twisted wreck. The experimental weapons had worked, but the cost was written in blood. The 47 seconds of vulnerability ended. Valthek shields began to flicker back online, but 68 of their ships were already destroyed. Smoke and debris filled the orbital zone. Bodies and wreckage tumbled through space. Morthak stared at his tactical display in disbelief. In less than a minute, he had lost a quarter of his armada. How was this possible? These were primitive humans, species barely capable of interstellar travel. Yet they were winning. "All ships, emergency retreat formation," he commanded. "Pull back and regroup." But his communications were still partially jammed by Captain Taewon Shin's electronic warfare. The retreat order reached some ships but not others. The Valthek formation, already battered, began to fragment. Admiral Deho saw the opportunity. The enemy was confused, hurt, and losing cohesion. This was the moment to press the advantage, even though his own fleet was exhausted and damaged. "All ships, pursue and engage. Don't give them time to reorganize." Commander Jiwon Lee was no longer on the Indomitable. She had transferred to the cruiser Resolution when its captain was killed by a direct hit to the bridge. The Resolution was badly damaged, atmosphere venting from multiple hull breaches, but it could still fight. "Forward guns, target that carrier," she ordered, taking her position in the devastated command center. Sparks showered from broken consoles. The smell of smoke and burnt electronics filled the air. "Sir, we have multiple reactor warnings," the engineering officer reported. "If we push the weapon systems any harder, we risk a complete power failure." "Then we risk it," Jiwon replied. "Because if we don't stop them here, Earth dies. Fire everything." The Resolution's remaining weapons hammered at a Valthek carrier 3 times its size. The larger ship's shields were still recovering from the pulse weapon. Railgun slugs punched through weakened sections of armor. Missiles found vulnerable points and detonated deep inside the hull. The carrier tried to return fire, but its weapon targeting systems were damaged. Its shots went wide, missing the Resolution by hundreds of meters. The human cruiser kept firing, relentless despite its own wounds. Finally, the Valthek carrier's reactor containment failed. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash that temporarily blinded every sensor in the area. When vision cleared, the carrier was gone, replaced by an expanding cloud of debris. "Target destroyed," the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. Jiwon allowed herself a moment to breathe. Then she looked at the tactical display and felt her stomach sink. The Resolution had drifted during the engagement, drawn by Neptune's gravity. They were too close to the radiation belt, where the giant planet's magnetic field trapped deadly particles. "Helm, get us away from that radiation zone." "Trying, sir. Main engines are responding sluggishly, maneuvering thrusters only." It would take time to pull away from the radiation belt, time they might not have. Already several Valthek ships had noticed the Resolution's vulnerable position and were moving to attack. Back on the Indomitable, Daiho saw Commander Lee's situation. "Captain Park, can your fighters provide cover for the Resolution?" Hyunwoo checked his squadron status. 24 fighters left from the 50 that had launched. His pilots were exhausted, their ships damaged and low on ammunition. But Commander Lee needed help. "We're on it, Admiral. All wings, form on me. We're going to buy the Resolution time to escape." The fighters streaked across the battlefield, intercepting the Valthek ships moving toward Commander Lee's cruiser. They couldn't stop the larger vessels, but they could harass them, draw their fire, make them think twice about ignoring small, fast targets. Pilot Sung-Ho Kwon found himself flying through hell. Energy weapons crisscrossed space around him. His shields were down to 30%. His left engine was making a grinding noise that couldn't be good. But he stayed in formation, firing at Valthek ships whenever he got a clear shot. A Valthek destroyer locked onto him. Sung-Ho saw the targeting indicator light up his threat display. The destroyer's main gun was charging, preparing to fire. At this range, the shot would vaporize his fighter completely. Then Captain Park's fighter appeared from nowhere, firing a full missile salvo at the destroyer's bridge. The attack didn't destroy the large ship, but it disrupted its targeting long enough for Sung-Ho to escape. "Stay focused," Hyunwoo's voice came through the comm. "We're all getting out of this alive." That's an order, but orders couldn't change reality. 3 more fighters died in the next 2 minutes, blown apart by weapons too large and powerful for their small craft to survive. The remaining pilots kept fighting, kept buying time for the Resolution to reach safety. Captain Taewon Shin's stealth frigate, the Shadow Runner, emerged from hiding to launch torpedoes at point-blank range into a Valthek battleship. The massive ship never saw the attack coming. Explosions rippled along its spine. The battleship began to list, its main systems failing. "That's for the Valiant," Taewon said quietly, already moving his ship back into hiding before return fire could find him. The Valthek fleet was in chaos now. What had begun as an organized retreat had become something closer to a rout. Ships fled in different directions, their formation completely broken. Morthak's command vessel tried to rally them, but too many ships had lost communications or were too damaged to respond. Medical Officer Yuna Park, no relation to the engineer who had died on the Valiant, worked desperately in the Indomitable's sickbay. The wounded kept coming, faster than her team could treat them. Burns, vacuum exposure, radiation poisoning, traumatic injuries from explosions and collisions. "We need more plasma," one of her assistants called out. "We're running out." "Use the reserves from Cargo Bay 3, Yuna replied, not looking up from the soldier she was treating. The woman had severe burns across half her body. Her chances weren't good, but Yuna refused to give up on anyone. A young ensign was brought in, both legs crushed by falling equipment. He was conscious and in terrible pain. "Doc, am I going to die?" "Not if I have anything to say about it," Yuna replied, already preparing emergency surgery. "You stay with me. Think about home. Think about what you'll do when this is over." She worked through the screams and the blood and the impossible choices of triage. Save this one, make that one comfortable because there's nothing more you can do. Every doctor's nightmare repeated hundreds of times. On the bridge, Admiral Daeho watched the tactical display update. The battle had been raging for 11 minutes now. The explosion of Morthak's command ship lit up the darkness like a second sun. For a moment, every combatant on both sides simply stopped and stared. The supreme commander of the Valthek Empire, who had conquered 40 systems and never known defeat, was dead. His flagship was nothing but expanding debris. Admiral Daeho Kang felt no triumph, only exhaustion. The battle clock showed 11 minutes and 43 seconds since the first shot was fired. In less than 12 minutes, everything had changed. "Sir, the Valthek fleet is breaking formation," Lieutenant Bora Kim reported. "Multiple ships are initiating faster-than-light drives. They're retreating. All ships maintain pursuit," Daeho ordered. "Don't let them escape cleanly. Make them remember this day." Captain Hyunwoo Park's fighter squadron, reduced to 19 operational craft, harassed the fleeing Valthek vessels. They couldn't destroy the larger ships, but they could damage engines and weapon systems. Every crippled enemy ship was one less threat to Earth. Pilot Sung-Ho Kwon found himself chasing a Valthek frigate that was desperately trying to reach jump distance. His fighter was running on emergency power, both engines damaged and weapons nearly depleted. But he stayed on target, firing short bursts that chewed into the frigate's rear armor. The Valthek ship's engines suddenly flared brighter, attempting to jump. But Sung-Ho's last missile had damaged the drive core. Instead of jumping to faster than light, the frigate's engine simply exploded. The ship tumbled dead in space. "Got another one," Sung-Ho reported, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "Good work," Hyunwoo replied. All wings returned to carriers. "We've done enough." The remaining human ships continued firing at the retreating Valthek fleet. Captain Taewon Shin's stealth frigates emerged from hiding one final time, launching torpedoes into the backs of fleeing enemy vessels. 17 more Valthek ships were destroyed or disabled as they tried to escape. Then suddenly it was over. 82 Valthek ships had fled into faster than light. They were gone, leaving behind 218 destroyed vessels and the bodies of nearly 200,000 alien soldiers. The largest armada ever assembled had been shattered by a force less than a quarter its size. On the Indomitable's bridge, silence fell. Nobody spoke. They were all too stunned by what they had just survived. Commander Jiwan Lee's voice crackled over the comm from the Resolution. "Admiral, are you seeing this? Did we actually win?" "Yes, Commander. We won." Deho said the words, but they felt unreal. He had planned for victory but never really believed it was possible. Yet here they were, alive and victorious. "All ships, damage reports," he ordered, forcing himself back into command mode. The reports came in slowly, each one a litany of destruction. 13 ships destroyed completely, their crews dead. 28 ships heavily damaged, limping on auxiliary power. Nearly every vessel in the fleet had casualties. Total human losses: 4,700 men and women dead. Another 3,000 wounded. The numbers were staggering, yet somehow they had won. Medical Officer Yuna Park was still working in the sickbay when the announcement came that the battle was over. She looked around at the dozens of wounded still needing treatment and realized the battle wasn't over for her. It wouldn't be over for hours. "Keep working," she told her exhausted medical team. "These people fought for Earth, now we fight for them." Dr. Minji Choi sat on the floor of the weapons bay, staring at her quantum disruption generator. The device had cooled down, its job done. It had worked. Her experimental weapon had turned the tide of battle. But the cost kept running through her mind. The Valiant destroyed. 300 people dead because she had built a weapon with a 40% failure rate. Admiral Deho found her there an hour after the battle ended. He sat down beside her without speaking, just sharing the silence. Finally, Minji spoke. 300 people died because of my weapon. 6,000 people lived because of your weapon, Deho replied. Maybe more. If that pulse hadn't worked, the Valthek would have ground us down through sheer numbers. Earth would have fallen. Does that make it worth it? I don't know. But I do know those 300 people volunteered to carry that weapon knowing the risks. They chose to take that chance so others might live. That choice meant something. Minji nodded slowly. She would carry the weight of those deaths for the rest of her life. But Deho was right. They had volunteered. They had known the odds and chosen to fight anyway. Captain Taewon Shin brought his stealth frigate Shadowrunner back to the fleet, his electronic warfare job complete. His systems had jammed Valthek communications, created false sensor readings, and generally made the enemy's technology work against them. It wasn't glamorous work, but it had been essential. "Well done, Captain," Deho told him over the comm. "Your deception gave us the opening we needed." "Just doing my job, sir. Though I have to admit I didn't think we'd survive to celebrate." "Neither did I," Deho admitted quietly. Engineer Ha-Jun Yoon checked on the civilian freighters that had been converted to warships. Of the 23 ships that had entered battle, 19 survived. The Morning Star, commanded by Captain Somin, was battered but intact. Its industrial mining lasers had proven surprisingly effective against Valthek armor. "How's your ship?" Ha-Jun asked Somin over the comm. "Held together with prayers and welding," she replied. "But she flew. We actually fought in a space battle and lived to tell about it. My crew is still trying to process what happened." "Tell them they helped save Earth, that's what happened." Across the fleet, similar conversations played out. People trying to understand what they had just lived through. The impossible victory, the losses, the moment when everything could have ended but didn't. 4 hours after the battle, Admiral Deho broadcast a message to the surviving Valthek fleet. He had no idea if they were listening, but he wanted to make something absolutely clear. "This is Admiral Deho Kang of the Terran Defense Coalition. You came to our home system expecting easy conquest. You learned otherwise. This is your only warning. Humanity will not surrender. Humanity will not bow. If you return, if you threaten our worlds again, we will destroy you. Tell your empire what happened here. Tell them that Earth is defended. Tell them to stay away." The message was transmitted on all frequencies, broadcast toward every star system where Valthek forces might receive it. Let them hear. Let them understand. 3 days later, Captain Hyunwoo Park stood in the fighter bay, looking at the 19 pilots who had survived the battle. 50 had launched. 31 had died. The empty spaces in the formation were like missing teeth in a smile. You flew like demons, he told them. You executed maneuvers that everyone said were impossible. You fought against odds that should have killed you all. Some of our friends didn't make it back, but because of what we did together, their families are alive. Their world is safe. That has to mean something. Pilot Sung-Ho Kwon raised his hand. Sir, are we going to keep training on the gauntlet maneuver? Yes, because now we know it works. And the next time someone threatens Earth, we'll be ready. Yunwoo paused. But we're also going to train on how to survive it better. We lost too many good pilots. That changes now. Lieutenant Junho Ryu received a promotion and was given command of a new frigate. The spearhead had been too damaged to repair, but his tactics had destroyed more Valthek ships than any other single vessel. He accepted the promotion quietly, thinking about the crew members who hadn't survived. Commander Jiwon Lee was promoted to captain and given permanent command of the Resolution. The battered cruiser would be repaired and upgraded, and she would lead it into whatever battles came next. She stood on her new bridge, looking at the damage still being repaired, and made a silent promise to everyone who had died. She would be ready next time. They all would. News of the battle reached Earth within hours. Then it spread to the 12 human colony worlds. Then slowly it began to reach other alien civilizations. The Valthek Empire, which had seemed unstoppable, had been defeated. A force of 300 warships had been shattered by fewer than 50 human vessels. The galactic political landscape shifted overnight. Species that the Valthek had conquered began to rebel, inspired by humanity's victory. The Valthek Empire, facing multiple uprisings and internal chaos, began to collapse. Within 2 years, it would be broken into a dozen smaller states, none of them capable of threatening other species. The Terran Defense Coalition grew stronger. 3 new colony worlds petitioned to join. New ships were built, incorporating lessons learned from the battle. Dr. Minji Choi's quantum disruption weapons were refined and standardized. The failure rate reduced to nearly 0. A memorial was constructed in orbit around Neptune, at the exact location where the battle had been fought. It listed the names of everyone who had died. 4,700 names carved in metal that would last for centuries. Each name represented a person who had chosen to fight for Earth when surrender would have been easier. 6 months after the battle, Admiral Deho stood before the Terran Congress, testifying about what had happened and what it meant for the future. We won, he told them, but we can't afford to forget how close we came to losing. We were lucky. We had brilliant people. We had experimental weapons that worked, and we had an enemy who underestimated us.